The clock on the nightstand reads 6:43. A 58-year-old man named Robert opens his eyes the way he has for decades, rolls onto his side, and reaches for the phone that has already been buzzing with messages. He feels fine. A little thirsty, a little stiff in the left shoulder, nothing more. By 7:15, he is standing in the kitchen waiting for the coffee to finish, scrolling through the news, when the left side of his face suddenly feels heavy. The words he tries to speak come out thick and wrong. His wife looks up from the toast and sees it instantly. Within minutes, the ambulance is on the way. Robert survives, but the stroke that struck in those quiet morning minutes steals part of the speech he once used so easily and leaves a permanent reminder that the most dangerous hours of the day are often the ones that feel the most ordinary. That kind of morning is more common than most people ever want to believe. Research has shown for years that strokes and heart attacks cluster in the early hours after waking, when blood pressure rises naturally, blood is thicker from overnight dehydration, and stress hormones begin their daily climb. The body is shifting from rest into action, and for many of us that transition happens without any protection at all. If any part of Robert's story feels uncomfortably close to someone you love or to the life you are living right now, I hope you will take a quiet second to like this video and subscribe to Health Journey. We create these conversations so that ordinary mornings can become safer ones, and every person who stays with us helps keep that work alive. What follows is not a list of complicated medical rules. It is a set of 7 simple morning habits that work with the body's own rhythms instead of against them. Each one is grounded in what we know about blood pressure, circulation, inflammation, and the quiet ways the brain can be protected long before any crisis appears. They take almost no extra time. They cost almost nothing. And when they become part of the way a day begins, they can lower the odds that a morning like Robert's ever becomes your own. Stay with me through all 7, because the later ones build on the earlier ones in ways that many people never expect, and the final combination is more powerful than any single change alone. The protection does not come from dramatic effort. It comes from small acts repeated until they become the new ordinary. Many people begin with only 1 or 2 of these habits and still notice a difference in how their body feels by mid-morning. The full set simply multiplies that difference over months and years. The habits are not about perfection. They are about giving the body a quieter, safer start when it is most vulnerable. The first habit begins before your feet even touch the floor. Reach for water. A full glass, cool or room temperature, drank slowly while you are still sitting on the edge of the bed. Overnight, the body has gone 8 or more hours without fluid. Blood volume drops a little. The blood itself becomes slightly thicker. That change may sound small, yet studies of people admitted for stroke have repeatedly found that many arrive dehydrated, and dehydration makes it easier for clots to form and harder for blood to move smoothly through the tiny vessels that feed the brain. 1 glass of water begins to reverse that overnight deficit. It is the simplest possible act of care, and it costs less than a minute. Keep the glass or a bottle beside the bed so the habit requires no decision. Over weeks, it becomes automatic, and the cardiovascular system starts every day with a quiet advantage it would otherwise lack. Think about how many mornings you have started by reaching for caffeine instead of water. That small switch alone can change the way your blood flows during the hours when risk is highest. Some people notice they feel less foggy within days. Others simply feel a subtle steadiness they had not realized was missing. The body responds to that first glass as if it has been waiting for it, and the response is measurable in the way blood moves more freely through vessels that were briefly under extra strain. The habit also creates a moment of intentional care before the day begins to pull attention outward, and that intentionality itself becomes protective. Over time, the simple act of drinking water first becomes a quiet signal that the day will begin with respect for the body rather than neglect. After the water comes gentle movement. Not a hard workout that spikes the heart rate before the body is ready, but enough motion to wake the circulation and ease the natural morning rise in blood pressure. Research that followed tens of thousands of adults found that people whose peak activity happened in the morning hours carried lower risks of both coronary disease and stroke compared with those who were most active later in the day. A 10-minute walk around the block, a few minutes of light stretching in the living room, or simply moving from room to room while the coffee brews can be enough. If the weather allows, step outside. Morning light helps set the body's internal clock, and a steady circadian rhythm supports healthier blood pressure patterns for the rest of the day. You do not need perfect fitness. You only need to refuse the complete stillness that so many mornings begin with. People with stiff joints or limited balance can still benefit from seated marches or slow arm circles. The goal is to remind the vessels that they are meant to move. Many who begin this habit report that their energy feels more even by mid-morning, as if the body has been gently reminded that it is still capable of graceful motion. The act of moving early also interrupts the long stretch of inactivity that overnight rest creates, and that interruption matters more than most people realize when the goal is protecting the brain. Over time, the morning movement becomes a quiet conversation with the body, a daily reassurance that the vessels are still being asked to do the work they were designed for. The motion does not have to be long or intense. It only has to happen before the day settles into complete stillness again. The third habit addresses the invisible load that arrives the moment the mind wakes. Most of us open our eyes and immediately feel the weight of the day ahead. Unanswered messages, family worries, the endless scroll of news. That mental pressure releases stress hormones that push blood pressure higher at the exact hour when it is already climbing. 5 quiet minutes of slow breathing can interrupt the surge. Sit still. Breathe in for a count of 4, hold briefly, and release for a count of 6. Feel the shoulders drop and the jaw unclench. Studies on simple breathing practices and meditation show modest but consistent reductions in blood pressure, and every millimeter matters when the vessels of the brain are involved. Some people use the time for a short prayer or a single sentence of gratitude. The form is less important than the pause itself. That small island of calm changes the emotional and physical tone of the hours that follow. Imagine how different the day feels when it starts with a few minutes of quiet instead of an immediate rush of cortisol. That difference accumulates in the walls of your arteries over months and years, quietly lowering the background pressure that can eventually become dangerous. The mind learns that the morning does not have to begin with urgency, and the body follows that lesson with lower tension in the very vessels that need protection most. The pause also creates space for a different kind of attention, one that notices how the body actually feels rather than rushing past it. In a world that constantly pulls attention outward, those few minutes of inward quiet become a form of daily medicine. Breakfast is the fourth habit, and it carries more power than most of us give it. Skipping the first meal has been linked in multiple studies to higher stroke risk and poorer long-term heart health. When the body goes too long without food, inflammation can rise and blood pressure can climb. Instead of a pastry eaten standing up or nothing at all, choose something that includes protein, fiber, and foods rich in potassium. Oatmeal with berries and a handful of nuts, Greek yogurt with fruit, or eggs with spinach and a slice of whole grain toast all support the Mediterranean-style pattern that major guidelines now recommend for stroke prevention. Potassium helps balance sodium and keeps vessels more flexible. Steady blood sugar prevents the mid-morning crash that so often leads to poor choices later. Sitting down, even for 10 minutes, turns the meal into a moment of real nourishment rather than another hurried task. People who make this shift often notice that their mid-morning energy no longer crashes, and that subtle sense of stability is a quiet gift the body returns in kind. The difference between a rushed bite and a few minutes of real food becomes clearer the longer the habit continues. Over time, the body begins to expect that early nourishment, and the inflammatory response that can accompany long fasting periods begins to settle into a quieter pattern. The meal itself becomes a daily act of respect for the vessels that must carry blood to every corner of the brain. The simple decision to sit and eat something that truly feeds the body rather than merely fills it changes the trajectory of the hours that follow. The fifth habit is quiet but essential. If you take medication for blood pressure or cholesterol, take it at the same time every morning, ideally with that first glass of water. Consistency matters more than most people realize. Blood pressure has a natural morning peak, and medication timed to cover that window offers better protection. Even if you do not take medicine, consider checking your blood pressure at home a few mornings each week. A simple monitor kept in plain sight makes the habit hard to forget. Writing the numbers down or storing them in a notebook reveals patterns that can guide a conversation with your doctor long before any emergency. Knowledge of your own numbers is one of the most practical forms of power available after 40. Many people are surprised to discover that their morning readings are higher than they expected, and that awareness alone becomes the first step toward meaningful change. The act of looking at the numbers turns an invisible risk into something you can actually respond to. It replaces vague worry with clear information, and clear information is what allows real protection to begin. The habit also creates a moment of honest attention to the body, a brief daily check-in that many people come to value more than they expected. Over time, the numbers become less frightening and more useful, a quiet guide rather than a source of anxiety. The sixth habit may surprise people who have been told to avoid coffee. Recent research suggests that adults who drink coffee mainly in the morning have a lower risk of dying from heart disease and stroke than those who drink it throughout the day or not at all. The benefit appears strongest with 2 or 3 cups and does not extend the same way to afternoon or evening drinking. Coffee contains compounds that may ease inflammation, and the morning timing seems to align better with the body's natural rhythms. Keep the amount moderate and skip artificial sweeteners that some studies have linked to higher clotting risk. Black coffee or coffee with a little milk is enough. The warm cup itself can become a calm transition rather than a jolt, a small pleasure that also happens to support vascular health when timed wisely. For many people, this becomes a cherished part of the routine, a moment of warmth that also happens to work in the body's favor. The key is the timing. Afternoon coffee does not appear to carry the same protective association, and evening coffee can disrupt the sleep that itself supports healthy blood pressure the next morning. When the coffee is taken as part of a calmer morning sequence rather than a frantic rush, its benefits seem to settle more deeply into the day. The ritual of the warm cup becomes another small act of care rather than another source of stress. The seventh habit ties the others together and protects the nervous system from unnecessary strain. Delay the phone. Those first 20 or 30 minutes without screens allow the body to finish its natural waking process without the extra cortisol spike that arrives with emails, headlines, and social media. Use the time for water, movement, breathing, and breakfast. When you finally pick up the phone, you do so from a calmer baseline. Over weeks, this single boundary lowers the cumulative stress that quietly damages blood vessels. Many people discover that the world continues without them for half an hour and that they feel clearer and less reactive for the rest of the morning. The constant digital stimulation that greets so many of us the moment we open our eyes is a modern pressure the human cardiovascular system was never designed to handle at the precise hour when blood pressure is already rising. Protecting those first quiet minutes becomes one of the kindest things you can do for the vessels that keep your brain alive. The mind learns that it does not have to respond to every signal the instant it appears, and the body benefits from that learned calm. The boundary also creates space for the other 6 habits to take root without competition from the endless demands that screens bring. In a culture that rarely stops, choosing to begin the day without the phone is itself a quiet act of resistance and of care. Taken together, these 7 habits create a morning that works with the body's biology rather than against it. They address dehydration, the sedentary start, the stress surge, the inflammatory breakfast, the unmanaged numbers, and the disrupted circadian signals that all contribute to stroke risk. Because that risk climbs with age, with family history, with high blood pressure, with diabetes, and with earlier heart problems, these small daily choices become especially meaningful after 40 and 50. The protection is not dramatic, it is cumulative. Each morning that begins this way adds a thin layer of resilience to vessels that must last for decades more. The habits do not require perfection. They only require a willingness to begin, and then to begin again the next day. Over months, the body begins to expect this quieter start, and the systems that regulate blood pressure and circulation respond with greater stability. Picture someone you love, a spouse, a parent, a close friend, beginning tomorrow with these habits. Picture the quiet confidence that comes from knowing they have done something real to protect the years still ahead. Stroke does not only threaten life, it threatens the ability to speak clearly, to walk without help, to hold a grandchild, to enjoy the ordinary days that make a life feel whole. Prevention is not abstract. It is deeply personal. Think about the conversations that might never happen, the holidays that could feel different, the ordinary mornings that become extraordinary, simply because the brain and the body were protected by small acts of care repeated over time. The people we love are worth the few extra minutes these habits ask of us. The ordinary mornings we share with them are worth protecting, with the same quiet attention we give to the more dramatic moments of life. The years still ahead are shaped by the choices made in the quiet hours before the day fully begins. Even with the best habits, knowing the warning signs remains essential. Sudden numbness or weakness on one side of the face or body, trouble speaking or understanding speech, sudden changes in vision, loss of balance, or a severe unexplained headache all deserve immediate attention. Time is brain. Calling for help without delay can mean the difference between recovery and lasting disability. The morning practices we have talked about lower the odds that those signs will ever appear, yet they never replace the need for swift action if they do. Many families look back and realize that the warning signs were there but were dismissed as fatigue or a passing oddity. Awareness turns those moments into opportunities for rapid response, and that awareness is itself a form of love. Keeping the signs in mind does not create fear. It creates readiness, and readiness can save the very years these habits are designed to protect. The knowledge becomes another quiet layer of care that travels with you through every ordinary morning. If one of these habits already lives in your routine, or if one feels especially important to begin, I would love to hear about it in the comments. Tell us which of the 7 you plan to try first, or share a story about how a small morning change has already made a difference for you or someone in your family. Your words might be exactly what another viewer needs to read today. And if this conversation has stirred something in you, consider sharing the video with a family member or a friend who might benefit. Sometimes the most loving thing we can do is pass along information that could protect a life. The act of sharing is itself a quiet form of care, and care is what keeps the people we love safe through the ordinary mornings that hold more risk than most of us ever notice. As you move through the rest of your day, carry the awareness that the body is always listening to the choices made in the quiet hours of the morning. Those choices accumulate. They either strengthen the vessels that feed the brain or leave them more vulnerable. You have more influence than you may have believed. Start tomorrow with water. Move a little, breathe, eat something real. Take care of the numbers that matter, enjoy a moderate cup of coffee if it brings you pleasure, and give yourself a few minutes free of the digital noise. Do these things not out of fear, but out of a steady, compassionate respect for the life you are still building. The morning is not just the start of the day. It is one of the most powerful opportunities you will ever have to protect the years that remain.